Now, this is the father of her children, Casey Barrera Rosa. He's charged with murder, and he's currently in ISIS custody. And we also have this mugshot of his uncle. Authorities charge Rolvin Barrera with being an accessory to the crime. A spokesperson for the Charles County Sheriff's Office says the suspect was methodical in hiding this woman's body, burying her deep, and using old dirt to conceal the hole. Authorities told us that they found fraudulent immigration documents for Barrera Rosa and confirmed he was in the U.S. illegally.
The Supreme Court issued a rare weekend ruling Saturday, temporarily blocking the Trump administration from deporting a group of Venezuelans held at a Texas detention facility using a centuries-old wartime law. This comes after an emergency appeal was filed last Friday by the American Civil Liberties Union, challenging the administration's use of the 18th century Alien Enemies Act.
When is an invasion an invasion? Who actually gets to determine this? And under the Constitution, it certainly says, under Article 4, it states that the authority is for the federal government to protect the states from invasion. So Congress and the president, we know that national security is, of course, under the president of the United States. So, Libby, tell us what you read in Alito's dissent and give us the backstory on all this.
Yeah, so the ACLU on Friday brought suit in 3 different courts to try and block the deportation of about 50 Venezuelans from a facility in Anson, Texas, which is in the northern district of Texas. They freaked out. The ACLU freaked out. They said, these people are being loaded onto planes right now. Hair on fire. They went to the Northern District Court of Texas. They filed their complaint there. They wanted this deportation stopped. They also simultaneously filed with the 5th District Court in New Orleans, right, which is a federal court. And then they also filed an emergency order with the Supreme Court. So the case was open in 2 lower courts, but the Supreme Court took it up anyway, which they're not supposed to do, because ultimately the Supreme Court is, an appellate court. Like, once you're hearing a case at the Supreme Court, it's been through a bunch of lower courts. So the Supreme Court decided that they would weigh in on this. They did that shortly after midnight on Friday night. It was a ruling where there were only 2 dissenters, and there was the opinion was unsigned, and it said that the Trump administration, the government, could not do any deportations until further order from this court, meaning the Supreme Court, which took up the case. So Alito said that he would later put out a statement. He later put out a 5-page dissent. It is very much worth reading. He criticized the court, saying that the Supreme Court did not actually have jurisdiction over this case because it was still in the 2 lower courts, right? And it hadn't gone through that process all the way. So that was one thing that he took issue with. And Alito also took issue with something that had been in the brief from the ACLU, and that was mentioned in the court's decision shortly after midnight. And that is where the ACLU said that they wanted to block the deportations of everyone who's part of this putative class. And Alito said, what class? What are you talking about? The ACLU's goal is to create to take all illegal immigrants who may be subject to the Alien Enemies Act, refer to them as a single class, and then attempt to bring national cases. Because per the Supreme Court's April 7th ruling, I believe it was April 7th, the cases cannot be brought to block deportations except in the districts where the detainees are held. And that's just a lot of running around for the ACLU, which used to protect American civil liberties and now clearly does not. That's a lot of running around for them, and they want to bring a bunch of national cases. That's my understanding of that situation. Alito doesn't like any of it. He says the court doesn't have jurisdiction, and these people are not part of a class.
And by the way, I want everybody out there. So if you want to get into this and if you want to have this discussion, because we do need to have this discussion, because that's Alito, that's clearly the correct take from a legal perspective, but walk it back to the constitutional perspective here for a second as well, because these are constitutional issues. And I think that's exactly where Alito is putting his finger here to say, wait a minute, hold on. We can sit there and say, oh, we're the judicial branch and we get to criticize the executive. And yet at the same time, we need to hold ourselves to the same standard. We can't say the executive is violating the law while we ourselves are violating the law and violating our own procedures by not even waiting for lower courts to weigh in. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, it's a political question as well as a legal question and a constitutional question. So send us your emails. The email is 1776@humanevents.com, 1776@humanevents.com. Is the United States under invasion? And more to the point, who has the authority to declare an invasion? Now, certainly we know that President Trump declared one with his executive order. I believe it was the day he was inaugurated, or if not, then, very close to it. And so that is the legal basis for declaring an invasion under the Constitution. That is national security. That is directly on defense of the nation is directed under the Constitution. As I read before, under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, it is that the federal government is obligated to protect states against invasion. And then, of course, when it comes to Congress, certainly the Congress has the power to declare and fund war. But of course, the president, as we know, has the ability to declare emergencies. And of course, this is why we have a president to begin with. That's why we don't just have a parliamentary system. We have a president specifically for the cases of national emergencies. And I really want everyone to weigh in on this because, Libby, and you've done a lot of reporting on this as well. You've written op-eds on it as well on humanevents.com, because this is the salient question. I really think that when you talk to liberals, they think that we're joking or something when we say the United States is currently under invasion, don't they?
Yeah, they do think that. And they talk about, immigration law and we have to be empathetic and all of this stuff. And what they forget is that the border was under control in 2020. The border had Donald Trump had sealed that up. He'd done a really great job. And that's why he was elected in 2016. And when Joe Biden came into office, his first day in office, he reversed so many of Trump's executive orders, including the ones that had tightened up the border. He flung the doors open wide, said, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. Congress needs to make new laws. He decided not to enforce the existing laws. So did his DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas. You saw some in the GOP try to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, but he still just served out his term as though he were doing a great job, which obviously he was not. He literally invited the world in March 2021, while the administration said, the border's secure. There's nothing we can do about it. They facilitated this invasion. They didn't pay any attention to the existing laws. And now when the Democrats are saying, rule of law, this and that, right? I mean, I get it. Checks and balances. I'm all in favor of that. But you spent 4 years flouting immigration law, and now you want to beg mercy at the court? Is that seriously your jam? That's what you're doing? Where were the judges for 4 years? Where were the Democrats for 4 years saying, hey, Biden's breaking the law over here. He's allowing a border invasion. There's a huge border crisis, which you and I reported on this whole time. Let's put a stop to it. But they didn't care because they wanted this to happen. That's the only conclusion that you can come to, is that they wanted this to happen. And now that all these people are in the United States, their goal is to keep them here forever. That's why they have multiple different varying kinds of semi-legal statuses for these people. Refugees, asylum seekers, temporary legal protection, whatever it is, temporary protected status, because their goal is to keep them here forever. Chuck Schumer has said it. AOC has said it. Jasmine Crockett has said it. That's what they want. This is what they want. They don't want to let any of them go. They facilitated the invasion. They ignored the laws, and now they want to keep everyone here.
It's so simple. It's so simple when you look at it. And I really do think that this is also one of those issues where, and Brian Glenn was on earlier in the show, and he was talking about how they've stopped talking about Maryland Man all of a sudden. And by the way, Post Millennial has a story up, I believe, that you guys put out this morning, talking about a Maryland woman who was found murdered by an illegal alien just a few miles away from Abrego Garcia, where he was picked up. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. This story is not going to end of gang members murdering American women. That's not going to stop happening. And that's not going to stop happening just because Democrats are going down to El Salvador and, as you were saying before, handcuffing themselves to this prison. We're going to see more gang members killing more Americans. That's what they're doing. That's their goal. These are violent people who should be in prison. They should not be in our country. And if El Salvador is willing to house them so that we don't have to have them, recruiting more gang members while they're in American prison, then That's great. More power to Nayib Bukele.
No, we should. And by the way, El Presidente, I saw, was kind of making fun of some of the congressmen who came down originally that are there right now. And so this is a huge issue for us, though. It's a fantastic issue in the true sense of the word, fantastical, because these issues have been so completely adjudicated on the right side of, sort of the new media sphere. But in old media, they don't, with the exception of, like Fox, nobody talks about this. No one talks about the murders. They cut away when President Trump talks about Rachel Moran. The broadcasts don't pick it up. Broadcast news doesn't pick it up. None of them pick it up. And so they sit there and they act like all of this is President Trump just making it up. And by the way, they've been doing this for 10 years. From when President Trump first came down the golden escalator and made his entire speech entering politics about, by the way, the murder, the sexual assault, and rape of women on the southern border by these types of organizations. He's been the only one to talk about this from day one, and they immediately started slandering him from day one as well. Final minute to you, Libby Emmons.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is what's going on. They don't care. They don't care that these people are criminals. And I didn't believe it at first when President Trump said they're opening their prisons and sending everyone across the border. But it turns out that was true. That is what was going on. That was the goal of these other governments, destabilize the United States by sending the worst possible people into the United States by having them illegally cross the border. And we know that these gangs, Tren de Aragua, MS-13, whoever else, the cartels that are out there, they don't care about women except for as much as they could sell women for across the border. And what we have with this open border situation, we have had child sex trafficking. This is a horror. And this is what Joe Biden was advocating for. And they couch it all. Democrats couch this in terms of empathy, right? You have to be kind. You have to be open. No one cares, however, about empathy for the children who are trafficked. No one cares about the women who are murdered. And certainly none of them care about empathy for the American people.